Welcome to the Visibility Gap. I'm Dr. Jen Ashton. Today, we're shining a light on an essential but often overlooked aspect of womanhood, menopause. Despite impacting millions of women, it remains surrounded by silence, myth, and misunderstanding. Here's a striking reality. Nearly half of women experiencing menopause say their symptoms disrupt their work performance. Yet 75% of those who seek help don't receive adequate care. Even more concerning, 80% of OBGYNs admit they lack specific training to address menopause or perimenopause, according to the AARP. In this episode, we'll examine why menopause continues to be such an invisible topic, full of stigma, even as awareness grows. We'll unpack the challenges women face in accessing effective treatment and explore how companies can play a role in providing better support during this pivotal stage of a woman's life. Today's episode is going to be a little different. Usually we bring in a guest and then invite our expert panel to join the conversation. But today, we're switching things up. All of the women on our panel, myself included, have either experienced or are currently experiencing menopause. Now, menopause is definitely not a one-size-fits-all experience. It also doesn't arrive with a single symptom, nor does it come and go in just one day, not even close. It's a complex transition with a wide range of symptoms that can last for years. Joining us for this important conversation are two incredible and impressive experts who also have personal experience with this pivotal life change. Dr. Margaret Rutherford, a clinical psychologist with 30 years of experience, and Dr. Deirdre Cooper Owens, an award-winning author of the book Medical Bondage, Race, Gender, and the Origins of American Gynecology, and an associate professor of history at the University of Connecticut. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you so much.
So let's talk about menopause.
All right.
I have to say that it seems like a day does not pass when I don't hear from, see, or read a story about a woman who experiences perimenopause or menopause and it feels unprepared for that part in their life. How can this be? Modern times when we shouldn't be learning about something that quite literally affects every woman who lives to the mid-stage in life.
Mm-hmm. It just seems like there was such a silence for so long. And you're right. There's been a proliferation of kind of books and articles and documentaries and all of these things about menopause. And yet the average person still doesn't know. Right? We just think hot flashes and then it stops, your period stops, and you can't have kids, right? And for me, being in perimenopause, I'm learning so much, even after years devoted to learning about women's reproductive health and the history of it. I'm still learning.
Could it be also, as I hear the question and start thinking about it, that we want to deny the effect of aging? We do everything, we Botox, everything to try to say, oh no, I can put this off. I'm not going to look old. I'm not going to be old. I'm not going to be older. I'm not going to do that. And then all of a sudden the reality of your body has a voice and it's going to speak to you. And it's this thing that you can't give yourself an injection to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I feel like I could spend hours with each of you saying, okay, when is the first time you read a report and a historical account of menopause? Why is the collective psyche such that we have a problem thinking about or talking about or addressing women who are at the end of or past their reproductive window? I have to start with that because I always think the psychology is central to this. Is it because we just look at women as baby incubators and when that period is past, that's it?
I think what I've learned from myself and other people that I've seen through the years is that it's you can anticipate it. You can anticipate the idea that I'm no longer. I couldn't get pregnant if I wanted to, that kind of thing. But it does feel like sort of this invisible clock that's been ticking, and you didn't realize quite how it would feel for the ticks to be gone. And all of a sudden you're not hearing the clock ticking and you think, oh, wait, it's over?
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Can I share with both of you and with those of you watching my personal experiences? Because I have to say, part of it is embarrassing to share because I'm a board certified OBGYN. Right. You would think I would know better. Right. But I will say that I went into menopause officially at around 52 and a half, 52. When I tell you I had literally every symptom, head to toe, mild, thankfully. So it wasn't severe enough in isolation for me to really kind of break stride in my busy day-to-day life or schedule. But I had literally every symptom.
Wow.
Brain fog, fatigue, anxiety, skin changes, hair changes, weight gain, obviously irregular periods, which I was not unhappy about, by the way. I mean, you name it, right? I had it. And you know what my inner dialogue was? And I think it shows how easy it is for women to not put themselves first. My inner dialogue went something like this. Well, I'm 52. I guess this is what happens when you get to be 52. You know, so this must be normal, or this is really annoying, but I don't have time for this. Yeah. And my mood changes. Oh, my poor kid. I just want to say to my children, I'm sorry. And it wasn't until I was speaking to a girlfriend who, by the way, is a cardiologist, who said to me, why don't you talk to your gynecologist about this and what options there might be for you, that I connected the dots. And I share that because as a gynecologist, if it was that easy for me to miss the signs, not connect the dots, not address what was going on, not try to feel better, that can happen to anyone.
So the symptoms were happening and you just kind of get through them. Okay.
I mean, I literally, whether it was denial or a little bit of fear or a little bit of sadness or a combination, now that I'm on the other side, as I like to say, the only thing I regret is actually not throwing myself a little menopause party. Yeah. Because all kidding aside, I do consider it to be a privilege to go through menopause that is reserved only for the living.
Yeah. You know, for me, it was the opposite. I had, and still have, because I just am entering perimenopause. So it's been almost a year, and I am 52. But I remember having a deep sadness that I would no longer have a period after some time because it's been with me since I was 11.
Yeah, my mom, that was my mom's experience.
Right. And all of my friends were like, what's wrong with you? It'll be gone. Right. And I said, this thing has been with me since I was 11, 8 days after I turned 11. Right. And so I'm like, I don't know kind of my life without a period.
And it's so interesting you remember 8 days after I turned 11.
Because I wanted to be 10. It was like kind of a competition with the girls in my school. But there was a deep sadness, and I remember having to really wrestle with what did it mean. And I'd never cared about like gray hair or wrinkles or any of those things. I'm like, you age, you live, that's the gift.
Right.
But that like not having a period was the thing that kind of threw me into a mini depression.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Perimenopause was much more difficult for me than menopause. There were many more emotional symptoms that I was aware of, and anger being one of them. And again, you apologize. My husband is watching. I'm sorry. We had a joke, in fact, around the year 2000, and people were storing up on food and everything. And he said, just as long as you have your Lexapro, because I had such anger. The Lexapro really helped. And then went into menopause, 52, 53. I was quite startled when I quit having periods. And about a year and a half later, I started again.
Right.
And then went on for another year or something. But it was actually frightening because it was like, could I become a mom at 56? I mean, how awful would that be? So the physical symptoms were a little stronger in actual menopause, and the emotional ones were stronger in perimenopause.
And why do you think Why do you think people have a hard time talking about this, women and men?
Well, I'm older than both of you, and by quite a few years. And, I grew up at a time when women sort of whispered it, and it was the change. And so the fact that we're openly talking about it when I grew up would be a shock to my mother's friends and my mother, who told me never to talk about it, that it was a secret thing, and that it was something it was just this thing that women happened to women. So a lot has changed, but you're right, it is not a topic that has a lot of play until recently, and I'm not quite so sure why that is.
I think it's the loss of youth, of visibility. I was sharing with someone just today, who was talking about, I'm visiting New York and I'm kind of afraid to venture out. And I was like, oh, I don't have that problem. Once you're middle-aged, as a woman, you become invisible. And in some ways, I think it's the loss of youth and people's value of you.
Right.
And so you're treated as kind of an old bag, used goods. And so there is something, I think, about us that even goes unspoken, where you're trying to fight it. So whether that be silence, acting as if it didn't, it doesn't exist.
Right.
But I'm
overcompensating.
Right, overcompensating. And I think one of the great things, though, because we do have this proliferation of just lots of information about perimenopause and menopause, is that people are at least willing to put themselves out there. I attended a conference just a few days ago, and I was speaking, and then the thought just went away. And I said, I can remember anything in 1837. But 5 minutes ago, I'm in a brain fog of my life. And so you'll just have to forgive me. I promise it'll come back. But just for me making light of a situation that's a part of it.
Right.
Or waking up at 3 o'clock every morning to go to the bathroom. And my friends are like, oh my God, I wake up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning too, like clockwork, and just kind of having those aha moments that it's not exceptional or weird, but that there's a community of other women who are experiencing this, and that we can talk about it freely and without judgment, I think helps.
Hugely important. And you talk about a community. About 1 to 1.5 million American women enter menopause every year.
That's amazing.
Right.
And that's counting perimenopausal as well?
Just officially are considered menopausal, meaning 12 months from their last menstrual period. Over 1 million women every year.
Every year.
Right? Average age of menopause for white women in the U.S. is 51. For Black women, it could be within 6 to 12 months, a little bit later. Perimenopause symptoms can start in a woman's mid-30s.
Oh, my goodness.
Because think of that bell-shaped curve. The average age of menopause is 51. So that means some women go through menopause 47, 46. Their symptoms can start at 36. And a lot of times that goes under-recognized by healthcare providers, including GYNs, OBGYNs, under-treated, undermanaged, underappreciated by that woman's herself, her social circle, her work circle, her family. It's a big problem, and it comes with a significant financial toll. Something that I've been keeping my eye on recently is the impact of menopause awareness in the workplace.
Yes.
Because you have, in general, 50% or more of the workforce female.
Yeah.
Those more senior women, more experienced women in managerial positions, leadership positions, in a 45 years of age and older age group. And if they are finding, and this is very well reported, that these women, because they're largely unprepared and unsupported as they experience menopause, will just say, oh, you know what? I'm out of here. I have to deal with my health. I'm not going to deal with my health and my career or my job if I'm not supported better. And so there's a vacuum in the workforce.
So they drop out at that.
Correct.
Wow.
So you see legislation for menopause awareness and support services going on in Europe, in the UK, for example, which is it's interesting. And I'm curious your opinion on this, because it's been legislated in England as a disability.
Oh, has it really?
And obviously that has it's a double-edged sword,
It
right?
is.
I mean, it's giving women in the workplace some kind of provision in terms of legislative acknowledgement and support.
And access to care.
Correct.
Right.
But there are other people who say, don't call it a disability.
Yeah.
I have a 26-year-old son who literally, no joke, said to me within the last couple of weeks, Mom, do you have menopause? And I said, have?
Like,
It's not a disease.
Yeah. It's a biological process. Right.
So what do you think about that entering kind of the political legislative sphere?
Yes. So maybe there should be some more attention to accuracy in terms of defining this biological process, that it's not a disability, right, or a disease. Right. But having a very blunt and accurate conversation about this is just another phase of a human being's life, right? Those of us who are identified as female, this is what we're going to go through, right? Most of us. And so to be able to have that kind of conversation, but I think more so talking about the symptoms, right? And so we don't have to make it something that's pathological, but what we can do is, because there are these symptoms that will affect these women for years, how do we create an environment that cares for them, but also allows them access to care? Because what I'm noticing, particularly in college campuses, but I also work with a lot of folk in nonprofit, I go into the restrooms and you see tampons or you see, pads that are free. And so, I'm like, we've reached this space.
Fan.
Right. But, those are the things, right? To think about temperature modulation. Or, sometimes I'll have very frank conversations with my students. Like, if you knew what some of your middle-aged professors were experiencing physically, and we have to act like we're not, I never went through hot flashes, but just having an elevated body temperature. And so going into a classroom feeling flustered, but you're having to perform normalcy. Those are the things. Or they'll ask me a question and I can't remember because of brain fog, which is really important for a historian.
Kind of.
So those kinds of things. But I'll have a frank conversation that these are just things that we go through, and just to have grace. Right.
Do you think more transparency about that? To say, I'm having a hot flash. So
with some people though, there's some folk they're very guarded. They don't want you to know about that. For me, I think it's because of just who I am and what I do. I think it's important to have these kinds of conversations. And I also I want to be able to discuss it in a way that is quote unquote normal, that is typical. So it doesn't matter if you're male, female, non-binary, whatever it is, right? But that this is a normal part of what we go through. Because if someone sprained their ankle and had,
it would be a normal conversation.
Right, it'd be a normal conversation. Like, hey, you might need a different kind of desk or chair or whatever it is. Do you need to have your foot, elevated or your leg elevated? So we're having that kind of conversation to really get at how we can make them feel more comfortable. Same thing with menopause. I just don't think we know enough, and that we need to start having really frank, honest,
starting
accurate conversations.
As most things do, with education, communication, dropping stigma.
That's right.
Transparent dialogue about people's experiences and the facts. As you were talking, the fact that jumped out in my mind, for the average Black woman, hot flashes can last a decade. That's
just
according
for Black women or
for Black women, for Hispanic women, just over 8 years, for white women, just over 6 years.
Wow.
Huh.
That's based on a study called the SWAN study that was done here in the United States. That is a long time to be suffering and sweating in silence. So, we talk about not being seen or heard in what someone might be experiencing.
Yeah.
Do you think that men need to be part of this conversation? And if so, how?
I remember when I knew something was off. I'm pretty even-keeled. I don't like to become angry to the point I lose control and I'm enraged. And I remember this moment, my husband just kept talking to me about politics. And I was like, I don't want to hear it. Like, leave me alone. And I went off in a way after 20 years plus of marriage. I'd never spoken to him like that. And it scared me because I was like, wait, something's going on. And so when I started to do some research, went to my doctor, And she's like, you might be perimenopausal. And I was like, oh, no.
That was the first time that someone had connected the dots for
and
you.
I was like, oh my gosh. But it was really the mood swings. And then there were physical changes. I felt like my body, as this person who was in, just kind of entering her 50s, I felt like I was a teenager again. I would get, when I was a kid, we called them acne period bumps. That's what we would call them growing up. So I was like, wait, my skin is always good. What's going on? Why do I have this bump? Boom, period would come on a couple of days later. Or, real talk, the change in the vibrancy of the color of the menstrual blood. Just like when I was younger, those kinds of things. And I'm like, nobody has spoken about this. And I remember speaking to a friend who's a book editor right in Brooklyn a few months back. And I'm talking with her, and she's a little older. And she was like, just wait until XYZ happens or this happens. And I'm saying
But
it to her.
she's talking about it.
She's talking about it, yeah. And we're as different as night and day. This brunette Jewish woman, Black woman from the South. And yet our experiences and symptoms were almost identical. Right. And so just to be able to have someone who had a bit more experience was so helpful to know it wasn't just me.
So it sounds like you had this great friend. You had a doctor who connected the dots for you. Yeah. For you, Margaret, and the way you've shared your experience, but as a mental health professional, it must have been surreal almost when you felt yourself going through this. Then you learned what it was about. How has that changed or informed how you interact with a woman who's perimenopausal?
I always ask. There are a lot of therapists who don't ask about hormones or sex or a lot of things like that. Sadly. And I always ask, where are you? What do you have going on? You're right. I was very embarrassed that that I felt that out of control.
Me too.
Yeah, I hated that because I certainly can have my control streak, and so but I did admit it and reveal it, and then at the time, the whole HRT thing causing cancer was big, so I didn't try the HRT, the hormone replacement. But
that's since now been disproven.
Been debunked, yeah. But it was big back then.
Yeah.
And so I went on an antidepressant, which I said before was very helpful, actually. But I think, it is this clinicians, doctors, women in general just need to be aware that these hormonal changes can be vastly impactful.
Well, yeah, when you think about puberty, because you mentioned the comparison, right? Think what we all went through in puberty. Think about how much or little, could always be better, we're taught in health class or by our pediatrician or even by our own mothers or parents. We're prepared somewhat, right, for puberty. Almost across the board, nothing for perimenopause and menopause. And because I'm a glasses half full type of person, I always like to look for the positives and think, okay, well, we're older, we have more resources, more lived experience. We can not just get through this, but we can be prepared for it, we can be proactive, we can ask for support and help. Treatment management options, if we want it or need it, are there. And I always think that women should be given a full menu of options.
That's right.
These are the prescription options. These are the behavioral things you can do. These are the hormonal options, non-hormonal options. This is how you can improve what symptoms you may be having with food tweaks or exercise or cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, it's a long list of options. It's not one thing or nothing.
Right.
And then I think it is about, I try to actively, for myself and for women that I speak to, encourage them to be positive with their self-talk. Say, look, this is a privilege.
That's right.
Because the alternative is that you're not alive to go through menopause.
That's right.
So let's ask for help. Let's be nice to each other. But Do you think people are angry about menopause? I feel like there's just a lot of anger.
Yeah, and
Why
again,
is this happening to
Right.
me? Yeah.
and let's not
Right?
forget
Yeah.
this at the same time, anywhere between 45 and 55, again, just sort of you're sending kids off to college or military or to a job. They're leaving home. You're taking care of your own parents.
That's
You're-
right. It's a stressful time,
It's a
Emily.
very
Good
stressful
point.
time.
Very good
and
point.
so, your hormones going crazy isn't very helpful. I do want to address, I'm not sure I felt any kind of sense of freedom, like, okay, finally,
Right.
I'm not doing
Yeah.
this. But I will say, to address, to say something about what you said about sort of losing that sense of either sexual power or empowerment or your attractiveness.
Or just the loss of your period could be a
and
sad thing. Yeah.
again, that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
It was big for her. It wasn't all that big for me. I love to give decades a sort of an overarching theme.
Oh,
and
I
so,
like that.
Yeah. My 30s was the era, the decade of the mind, because I went to graduate school. My 40s, I had a child, a decade of, that kind of love. My 50s, my parents died. My son left for college, all that, lots of transitions. My 60s became, okay, this is the decade after all of that is done. It really was my decade of creativity, to try out things that were there for me potentially, but I'd not had the time or the effort or the physical strength or stamina to do all of them. And I'm a glass half full person too. I also say often, by definition, the glass is half full and half empty. So I think you can grieve some of the stuff you're talking about, because it is a huge change, while also saying, what could this decade, the next decade, whatever, hold for me?
That curiosity or
huge
sense
curiosity.
of, excitement about the future, I think is great. I think that's a great way of looking at it. I have a daughter who's 25, and we're very close. And I am acutely aware that she is watching and she is seeing what I go through. And even if it's not implicitly talked about, which we often do, share a lot more certainly than my mother, who was a registered nurse, shared with me. Just generationally, I think there are differences. But I'm acutely aware that I am contributing, even in subconscious ways, to the experience that she'll have when she goes through menopause. So for me, that's been a beacon kind of inspiration for my experience. What about in the work environment? How do you think that resources professionally can support women or could assist women with perimenopause and menopause?
Maybe for them to actually host or have these kinds of workshops or educational programs. I don't really see that as an issue.
Right.
And because I am a professor, I work with people. I always tease my students. I'm like, every time you see me, I'll be older. You all always remain 18 through 22, right? So I was like, I'm always saying young people in front of me, and I get older every year. But it's so youth identified with everything, and they kind of forget. These students come in, 4 years, they're gone. The professors are often the ones who stay for a long time. And so, there's some folk who will see you through your late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, until you retire at the same institution. And the universities just aren't, like I think lots of different job sectors, they just aren't making the cut in terms of identifying this really important sector of their workforce. Right?
So I think, I'm going to throw out an idea. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. You know how you see breastfeeding rooms? You see them in the airport, the breastfeeding hut.
Yes, yeah.
Why not?
Sure. Why not?
There should be a little cool box room
Something.
that exists in some job sites, locations, offices where women can just go in, have a moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, the fairs, the educational opportunities, I think, are hugely impactful. I was recently giving a talk to 30 CEOs of the top companies in the country and the world. These are companies that employ between 30,000 and 300,000 people. 29 of these CEOs were men. 5 were women. I was there talking about weight and weight loss and obesity and the conditions of overweight and obesity. And at the end, I said, next year we should talk about menopause. And one of the women CEOs, I won't say which one, what company, said, no one would come.
Wow.
Wow.
And so I implore men and women, but especially the men who are in positions of authority and power where they can affect change in their department, in their company, in their workplace. This is not just a women's issue. This is a human issue. Most men have at least one woman in their life that they care about.
That's right.
Whether it's their mother, their wife, their sister, their daughter, their partner, you name it.
Yeah.
And to have that be the answer, sadly from a woman who said no one would come.
Yeah. It's,
we have a lot of work to do.
No, it's so true. And I think, too, about, the number of intentional single parents in this country has increased exponentially over the past few decades. And there are large percentage of those single parents who are Black women in particular. And so they're raising young men.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important, these people are going to grow up, hopefully. And, one would hope that there's a sense of empathy because you're right. This is a universal issue. But also I think about, what could be transformed if we think about corporations and if they took it more seriously.
Well, again, the statistics of the women who leave the workplace because of 60, 70% suffering from severe symptoms associated with perimenopause and menopause, and rather than continue to work and address those symptoms, they don't get the support in their workplace. They leave their job. They leave their career at a time when, let's say around 50, they could potentially have 20 more years at the peak of their productivity, the peak of their earning potential. It comes with a significant toll.
That's right. Yeah.
That I think is just, this is not just optics. Yeah. This is dollars and cents and common sense.
Exactly.
So can I, girlfriend to girlfriend, give you some advice for your menopause journey? When you are through it, get yourself a present.
I will do that. I have no problems with that at all.
And treat yourself for recognizing the power of your body, the new stage in your life. Think of all you've accomplished with your PhD and your writing and your research and your teaching, and just think what is ahead of you.
Yeah.
And celebrate that and treat yourself. Don't wait for someone else to do it, although it sounds like you have a pretty nice husband, so he might get you a present too. But I think you should get yourself a present.
Thank you. No, I accept
And always put your health first.
Yeah.
Listen, we've talked about the physical tolls, the professional tolls, the social tolls, economic tolls. By the year 2030, menopause will be a $26 billion global market. Billion with a B. And that's in terms of testing, treatment options, research. Yes, we're a little late.
Yeah.
In history, I wish this had happened earlier, but we can't change the past. We can only change the here and now and the future. And I think that I know that what you both have shared has definitely helped people listening, women as well as men. So I really want to thank you for that. I think it's very rare to have two professionals, two such impressive and accomplished women who share on a personal and professional level.
Well, that's 3. You're included in that as well.
But this was a good coffee talk.
Yes.
So thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. And I know it helped a lot of people.
Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners. We really hope this episode of The Visibility Gap has helped you and your loved ones feel seen and empowered. If you found it valuable, please don't forget to share it, like it, and subscribe to stay connected with us.